Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for standing by and welcome to Visual BI's webinar. Today, we will walk you through our webinar titled Emerging Trends in Modern Data Warehousing, a Q&A style discussion around Snowflake versus BigQuery versus Azure Synapse versus SAP BW4 HANA. During the presentation, all participants will be in listen-only mode. If you have a question during the presentation, please submit it via the Q&A portion of the screen. Simply type your question into the box and click the send button. Our presenters will address questions at the end of the presentation, time permitting. If you don't hear an answer to your question today, don't worry, we will deliver answers to you individually after the webinar. This webinar is being recorded and a link to the replay will be sent to you via email. For today's panel discussion, we have Christopher Holliday, Chandler Stevens, Arun V, and Gopal Krishnamurthy. I will now turn the presentation over to our panel moderator, Gopal.
Thank you, Kirsten. Good morning, everyone. And we have a very exciting topic here today to talk about modern data warehousing and cloud data warehousing. And I am joined by Chris Holliday, who manages our consulting practice as well as the modern BI stack practice. Also joining me today is Chandler Stevens, who manages our Microsoft and Azure BI practice, and Arun Varadarajan, former SAP mentor and who focuses on our SAP BI practice and runs our COE today. Starting off, I wanted to start off with a legal disclaimer today. Since this is where we are comparing multiple products and comparing and contrasting, we wanted to share that this is a Visual BI point of view, and I wanted to caution you that your landscape, the kind of applications that you use, the platforms that you would use will change everything. So what we want you to do is always consult with your respective vendor account manager, and we want to take an educated decision. But what we are here trying to do is do a good faith sharing of our knowledge or what we see within our customer base. For the agenda today, what we are going to do is I'm going to be having the pleasure of moderating our panel, but I would start off with introducing Visual BI, and I will be transitioning to Chris, who will be talking about the emerging trends that we see in the data warehousing. And we will be talking about Snowflake and why we are seeing that it is trending very hot in the market. Then we will be talking about Azure Synapse. We'll be talking about Google BigQuery. And then for a lot of our own SAP customer base, we will be talking about where does forHANA stand among the other cloud data warehousing players, and then try to provide a high-level comparison summary. And then we will switch to a Q&A, and our thought is that we will have a lot of questions we have already collected from the customers. We are going to be talking about it, and we will be picking up some of the questions from the panel so feel free to ask your question. In case we are not able to get to your questions, we would definitely reach out to you by email and try to have a conversation. With that, I wanted to kind of share about Visual BI, and I know a lot of you have attended our webinars, but we have had over 100 registrants who are brand new to our webinars. Visual BI has been in business for over 11 years, all focused only on data and analytics, and we have the pleasure of sharing our doing consulting services all the way from strategy to implementations to cloud migrations. We also have about 5 different software products, and we also provide data and analytics training and ramp up to our customers. What I wanted to also touch upon is, because of our focus in data analytics, we have had the pleasure of serving over 100+ customers, especially even though a lot of our customers are worldwide, we predominantly cater to customers in North America, that is USA and Canada, a lot of large enterprise customers. We have the pleasure of supporting their data platforms and their reporting platforms. And I know some of our customers are here, and I wanted to thank you for your support. One thing I wanted to share, and I'm very, very proud of our employees and the team, is we started our journey with SAP, but as the data platform and the reporting platforms evolved, we shifted our focus with our customers. We are a premier partner of SAP. We are a gold partner of Microsoft Data and Analytics. But if you look at it, we are also an elite partner of Snowflake, and we have had the pleasure of migrating a lot of our customer base to modernizing their data stack with, it could be even B4HANA or Analytics Cloud on the SAP, or it could be on modernizing within the Azure platform with Power BI or, Azure SQL Data Warehouse, or now Azure Synapse. But if you really look at it, the whole technology partners in the ELT stack on, Click Attenuity, Fivetran, HVR, DBT, and Theobald, all of that are part of a successful ecosystem we have created around making a customer successful with modernizing their BI and data stack with Snowflake. With that, I wanted to share, I want you all to understand, we as a company believe in the journey or the cloud journey and modernizing the data stack, and we think the trend is going to continue, and we are here to support you irrespective of what technology stack you prefer or best suited for your landscape. What I would like to do is I wanted to transition to Chris, who is leading our consulting practice, and also talk about how customers are modernizing their cloud data warehousing and what are all some of the platforms that we recommend. And over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Gopal. Appreciate the introduction. So today we're going to take a look at what we consider to be emerging trends, but I think that we're really looking at the direction that enterprise companies are moving within their data ecosystems. We've got kind of a heads up comparison here of probably the three premier tools in this area: Azure Synapse, Snowflake, and BigQuery, along with SAP's strategic direction, BW for HANA. We're gonna, talk about the pros and cons of these and see how that fits into the whole cloud ecosystem. So next slide, please. Yep. So I think that what we're really seeing are, we see there was a big kind of complication. It's not really a word, but that's what it felt like. Was we complicated everything on the architectural side in order to achieve a couple of notches on our belt around big data. And so, there were these massive Hadoop deployments and, the likes of Cloudera and other companies that have gone by the wayside here that, that really were extremely complex in deploying, in developing against, in maintaining and keeping up and getting good results from. And of course, they were quite expensive to do that as well. Anytime you've got that kind of head count that's associated with this. But now we're seeing sort of the opposite direction. Snowflake Data Cloud and the GCP ecosystem and Microsoft's Azure ecosystem. You're seeing a big simplification of these architectures where we're taking out a lot of technical debt. And I think that that's a theme that we continue to drive with our customers is minimize your technical debt. Put your debt in the technical side where it's going to mean the most for your organization. And that's typically going to be on the data transformation and shaping of your data. We're seeing that competition is keeping the costs already low in this space, but also beginning to drive those costs down. This is only good news for consumers. This is good news for customers that are moving into the cloud or negotiating new deals. We see, hybrid cloud folks that are optimizing their workloads against cross-cloud types of stacks. There is a bit more complexity with that, but when you can make it work, you can reap a lot of benefits. We're seeing the maturing of these peripheral tools. In the beginning, there wasn't a lot of governance on data warehousing in the cloud. There weren't enough tools that could provide sort of a view of security and of of data catalogs and data quality and that sort of thing. And so we're beginning to see the maturing of these types of tools. New tools are coming into the market, but the tools that have been there and have now shown themselves to be durable are starting to really make a dent in their on-prem counterparts from legacy stacks. And then finally, I think the big move here and what will change the way that companies interact with each other as we embrace this this kind of methodology is data as a service. We saw Snowflake pioneer this with its data shares, and other companies are embracing this approach as well. And so, trading partner connectivity and SaaS application connectivity on the back end for analytics, will begin to move more towards the data share and the data marketplace and the other things that that result from data as a service. Thanks, Gopal. Next slide. So, the big advantage of a cloud data warehouse, if this is something that you haven't pondered before, if you're here to to get foundational information, is in the old days when I am going to go deploy my Teradata or my Oracle data warehouse, my SQL Server data warehouse, I go out, I provision servers. Even if I'm in the cloud on my infrastructure, I'm going to go provision all my virtual servers. I'm going to estimate how many users are going to hit this, how much data I need to preserve. I'm going to look at my query counts and try to estimate what the increase in those will be over the next 3 years. And then I'm going to go before the capital committee and request $1 trillion in order to fund this exercise, in hopes that I don't miss my estimations by more than about 30% in one direction or the other. And so this kind of pay up front for all of my anticipated demand type of exercise is now replaced with, it's completely elastic. If I'm not consuming anything, I don't pay for anything. When I consume, I can consume for as much as I'm willing to pay for, depending on what that workload might be. This is a all OpEx type of activity. It's 100% on demand. There's no real heavy planning that goes into this in advance. I can look at what my workloads are. I can look at KPIs around those workloads and adjust on the fly for this. I don't have to have a team of infrastructure resources. They're by the wayside, ready to tune and tweak and patch my servers and deploy new software and make changes to my clusters, because my SaaS provider is doing all of that for me on the infrastructure side. There's full sort of black box management of this. There's nothing for me to touch. There's nothing for me to tweak anyway, and this really provides the promise of the cloud, as it were. And then operationally, when I don't have to support the team of people that support the application, then I can focus all of my dollars and all of my effort on building value for the business, in the core area that the business needs value built, which is around the analytics, which is helping them make better decisions, helping them get a better view of their information. So the first platform we're going to talk about is Snowflake. This is a partnership that we started about 3 years ago. So Snowflake is the only cross-cloud data platform that is that's really worth taking a look at right now. They are available on AWS, on Microsoft Azure, as well as Google Cloud. It's pretty much the same experience across those 3 clouds, and you can do cross-cloud replication and management of your data. If you do happen to be a hybrid cloud or cross-cloud type of a customer, there's this big sort of simplification again of what all of the storage and the querying looks like. And so at the core is the storage of the data. So you've got a single storage for all of the data, regardless of how you share the data, regardless of how you make copies of the data. You've just got one copy of that data, and then completely isolated execution engines to query and load and manage that data. And then over the top of all that, with the governance, with the metadata, that these are services that are provided through the cloud layer, 100% SaaS. There's nothing for you to set up, tweak, configure around this. You have very few tuning management responsibilities or things to even really look at. And so the thing that we hear the most about with our Snowflake customers is everything just works. It works the way it's supposed to work. I've got a data lake. I've got a data warehouse. I can do my data engineering very easily within the Snowflake Data Cloud. All of my data science can be handled with Snowflake as my back end and also with external functions from Snowflake. I can build applications on top of this data, and of course, Snowflake's industry-leading data shares for working with trading partners on either consuming or providing data out to them as well. Next slide. So when we look at, again, I covered some of this in the previous slide, but Snowflake currently supports structured and semi-structured data and has announced support for unstructured data. So when I want to keep, images or music files or PDFs, things like that in Snowflake in the future, I'll be able to do that. It does provide this single source of the truth model from both a technical perspective, since I've got one copy of the data, as well as a functional perspective. And again, through data shares, I'm able to provide data for my partners as well as consume data from them in a secure manner, which they can see only the data that they need to be able to see. The elasticity in Snowflake is also industry leading. So you've got billing by the minute with 1 second increments thereafter. If I'm not consuming that data, I'm not paying for any of that compute. My storage costs are very low, and across the 3 warehouses, we see a pretty similar cost for data storage. If different departments need to have their own non-competing workloads, then they will get different, what Snowflake refers to as warehouses, which basically creates its own isolated compute engine for that department to work against. My accounts payable team may have lots of small queries that they need to run, so they need to kind of cluster horizontally. That workload would be completely isolated from the data science team, which is going to be doing gigantic intersections between thousands or millions of columns and rows. And again, whatever the data science team is doing, it's not going to interfere with the work that the accounts payable team is doing. There's no hardware. There's no stuff to support. We say this over and over again. You've got this very simple approach to your data. It lives in an ANSI SQL world, which is probably the most commonly spoken language in data. There's no maintenance to do, and you pay for what you use only. And then from the ability, the time to market aspect of this, my customer comes to me and says, I need a report in 2 days. This is something that might have taken 3 weeks before with my on-prem system, and now I can deliver this report maybe today, even maybe tomorrow, based on the ability to very agilely scale up the resources that are required in order to run the report, but also the development is quite an easy process, especially using the stack that Visual BI uses. Next slide. So, I guess unless you intentionally avoid looking at the public exchanges, that Snowflake is a winner. There's no other way really to look at it. Market cap is outstanding, but also its customer growth has been really solid and impressive for a company of any size. It continues to grow very strongly with Fortune 500 customers, which is our niche. And again, on a total customer level, the new customers is just really kind of is meteoric at this point. Okay, so now I'm going to hand it over to Chandler Stevens, head of our Microsoft COE, to talk about Azure Synapse.
Thank you, Chris. So yeah, with Azure Synapse, we really wanted to bring some of the capabilities forward so that, again, kind of a compare and contrast with some of the other services we're talking today. If you could go to the next slide. So Azure Synapse Analytics is often described as a limitless information analysis service that really represents an evolution of the work that Microsoft had done in their Azure SQL Data Warehouse offerings, bringing together both business data storage and, of course, big data analytics. Synapse provides that single service for all workloads when processing and managing and serving data for immediate business intelligence as well as data prediction needs. It can handle petabyte scale information, either on a demand serverless basis, which automatically scales for data exploration, as well as provides ad hoc analysis with provisioned resources at scale. Synapse follows the software as a service architectural pattern and can be used on demand to run only when needed to limit cost. It's comprised of the SQL analytics with full T-SQL-based analysis, comprised of a SQL cluster, which is a pay per unit of computation, and SQL on demand. Of course, Apache Spark is also fully integrated, along with native connectors that allow you to bring together multiple data sources within your Synapse workspace. It uses Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 as a data warehouse and provides a consistent data model that incorporates administration, monitoring, and metadata management sections. In areas of security, it also allows you to protect, monitor, and manage your data and analysis solutions. For example, leveraging single sign-on with the Azure Active Directory integration. It also provides further stages of analytics delivery process, giving users the possibility to also create reports and visualizations with the integration with Microsoft Power BI. Next slide. So this slide actually outlines the most common features that we hear about when customers talk about their adoption of Synapse. First and foremost, investments that have been made in any sort of data lake architecture or utilizing the common data model with existing business applications can be utilized within Synapse. Point number 2 talks about entry to using Synapse that can take the form of utilizing the built-in web user interface to complete a variety of data engineering tasks, as well as the ability to utilize traditional T-SQL for batch, streaming, and interactive processing. It also provides access to the Spark engine for big data processing with options to utilize languages such as Python, R, or .NET. Point number 3 talks about this notion that data is protected with Microsoft's transparent data encryption against a threat of malicious offline activity by encrypting data at rest. In addition, dynamic data masking enables administrators and data developers to control access to their company's data, allowing sensitive data to be safe and restricted. This feature prevents unauthorized access to private data by obscuring the data on the fly. The fourth point, customers who often adopt Synapse realize best-in-class integration with Microsoft Azure, with the ability to leverage the vast resources and capabilities in Azure DevOps for continuous integration and continuous delivery of data cloud services. Point number 5 talks about embedded within Synapse is the industry standard Apache Spark engine that can provide services for data preparation, data engineering, and of course, machine learning at scale. Number 6, for team collaboration, it provides a one-stop shop for practitioners across data engineering, data science, and IT professionals to collaborate together on analytics via the new Synapse Studio portal. And of course, last but not least, Synapse provides native workload management that can be optimized and isolated. This means that multiple workloads that can share implemented resources to enable assignment of the amount of CPU and concurrency for prioritization of queries. A Synapse customer can decide which business functions or business units have priority to access resources in the course of using the services. So to really summarize, Azure Synapse provides industry-leading SQL and industry-standard Apache Spark in a unified experience for all practitioners to participate in. Now, Chris is going to take us on a quick tour of Google BigQuery.
Thanks, Chandler. So Google BigQuery has been around for quite a while. It started its life as not as a data warehouse tool, but more as a way to process just large volumes of data independently. And over the years has grown into the GCP ecosystem to provide data warehouse services for Google customers. It is different from Snowflake, but it's also cloud native like Snowflake. It is good at certain aspects of your data warehousing lifecycle, and still probably growing against other aspects of the data warehouse lifecycle. But it does fit in very tightly with Google Cloud services. So if you're a Google Cloud customer, then probably you're going to look at BigQuery before you're going to look at anything else, and try to make a decision about which data warehouse platform to go with. I think very notably, it has free bulk loading when you're loading from Google Storage. And it also has true record by record ingestion if you want to load streams into your tables. Stream processing is tricky, and it does take a bit of relearning aspects of how you query and how you build KPIs around the data, but Google does offer row by row ingest on its streaming that other data warehouse services do not currently offer. So let's take the next slide. Sure. So when we see customers on BigQuery, again, if you're on Google Cloud, we look at, it's optimized for Google Cloud, and it provides a pretty tight experience. And as we noted, streaming is native. You also get this cross-geography replication, which is something that Snowflake and Synapse also offer. I'd say the one big area that it stands out over others is in its integrated machine learning. That currently with Snowflake, you have external functions where you can run your machine learning of choice against your Snowflake data. In BigQuery, that machine learning processing is built in to the BigQuery engine. Dynamic scaling of individual queries is something that, because BigQuery is basically a complete black box, you don't choose your, like with Snowflake, you choose your warehouse size. You just run a query in BigQuery, and it looks at the workload and it scales the resources associated with that query. Of course, what happens against that is you're being charged by the bytes scanned on BigQuery versus the time that you used it on Snowflake, and versus a block of usage time on Azure Synapse. And so that dynamic scaling, the intent is to give you a better performing result. Again, it always is going to depend on the type of query, what the data looks like, what the shape of your data is, to see what kind of results you're going to get. And as we all know, Google Analytics and the retail side of the world have been involved with Google Analytics for quite some time, and Google GCP particularly has made some pretty substantial inroads, because of that, with BigQuery. And so folks that rely on Google Ads and GA and YouTube are drawn into to BigQuery in that regard. I think next we're going to hand it off to Arun V to talk about the current state of BW for HANA.
Sure, thanks, Chandler. Coming to SAP BW4 HANA, since we deal with a lot of, next slide please. Since we deal with a lot of SAP customers, we wanted to look at the data warehousing options that SAP has to provide as well. And in this case, we looked at the current product that SAP has, which is being used, or which is the next phase of their data warehouse, which is BW4 HANA, which is nothing but SAP BW written exclusively for HANA. And if you look at it, BW HANA as a platform has basically the main driving factors are business agility, which is making sure that they are agile to respond to new requirements, etc. Cloud ready, which means that you can either deploy it in your data center, in on-premise, or deploy it on the cloud. And transition over to a modern data warehouse, where you kind of set yourself up to go to a modern data warehouse platform, which SAP is building out as we speak. And the main advantages here are the deployment. As I said, you can deploy it on-premise in your data center, or you can deploy it as a VM on the cloud, or have other deployment options on SAP Cloud Platform as well. The other big strong aspect is the data extraction, where you have native SAP integration for support like multiple calendars, currencies, hierarchies. The small things are already taken care of if you're extracting from an SAP system. And it also comes with a lot of built-in out-of-the-box extractors to extract data from SAP and extract it reliably as well. So that would be something which customers don't have to worry about, where you switch on the extractor and expect it to perform. And as for the data aspect of it, you do get centralized data where the data resides on your HANA database with dynamic tiering, with an ability to manage data temperature, like having cold storage out to low-cost storage so that you can save on costs. A centralized modeling tool with being able to be able to model both on the HANA side of things as well as the BW side of things, and all backed by business content, which SAP has slowly built over time, where they've brought in their experience on the various processes and built out KPIs and data flows and everything else in between with transformations, etc., to extract data from your SAP systems and present it to you reliably in terms of queries. And this business content goes back in terms of the legacy of BW, where they've been having the platform for more than 15 to 20 years at least, where all that process knowledge is being given to you as out-of-the-box content, which you can kind of install and configure if required. On top of this, there's a security that is built in to the BW system, where you can have role-based security, measure-based, and a lot of flexibility in defining that. And currency translations, unit of measure translations, all that are already built in. So if you have something in your SAP system, it'll come through automatically. And to top this off, you do get the performance of the HANA platform, which is the in-memory platform, and the additional HANA capabilities, like you can integrate Python, R, or any HANA analytic processes, etc., into the data warehouse system, and depending on your license, of course, and you can kind of integrate that into your BW platform or the data warehouse platform itself. And reporting on that is also reporting on your data or any of the HANA capabilities is built in using the analysis for office tool that SAP gives, which gives you excellent integration with support for macros, extraction, etc. And you also have very tight integration with SAP Analytics Cloud, which also adds its own ML and AI capabilities in a limited fashion there. Next slide. And coming to why BW forHANA is preferred, in many cases, what you've seen is if SAP is the largest system that you have in many cases, where most data is SAP, you can look at BW forHANA because of the integration that it offers. And master data or security and hierarchies are all centralized. So you can kind of have a central repository of all your master data and expect that to be, you can reuse that across your entire data warehouse. And that makes it attractive as well. The point 3 is more in terms of tight integration with SAP Analysis for Office, where you can consume the data out of your BW system and then add your formulae and add your defined measures, etc., that you can reuse across multiple reports, and makes it very easy for you to drill up, drill down, define formulae, etc. And a similar functionality is being extended to the SAP Analytics Cloud as well, where you can define your reports, everything, where you have either live or extract connections to the data warehouse, and you can report on it. The fourth one is where, let's say if you are a global company and you have global operations, you can have multiple languages, multiple currencies, translations, calendars, especially, all those things automatically come in. So you don't, and when I say automatically come in, if they are defined in your SAP system to support your day-to-day processes, those can be brought into BW natively, which means that you don't have to spend too much time trying to get that in or configure that into your data warehouse. The other biggest advantage is the business content extractors, which is a library of content that SAP provides, which is a full data flow, right? Starting from the extractor, which can be configured again once you install it, and the data flow, the transformations, the data models, all that come as a built-in package, which is offered along with the platform. And the guidance from SAP is also like, do not try to explore everything and try to find out. First, enable the business content, find out what's already there. So that saves a lot of effort and reduces the time to market as well. The last option that's also evaluated by most of our customers is, most of our customers are also have been on SAP BW for 10, 12, 15 years, and they have a large IT team and a lot of intellectual capital in the BW system, and transitioning the whole system to a new platform or rethinking it would seem too big a task to take up. So at that point, and at the same time, transitioning an existing BW team over to a BW forHANA or a HANA landscape would allow them to keep that knowledge or the intellectual capital in-house and worry about transitioning all the knowledge to a different platform at a later point in time, because they are also looking at what SAP has to offer on the modern data warehouse. Next slide, please. Coming to that, SAP is also not just BW4 HANA. So they are also building out their modern data warehouse platform. The reason why I say building out their modern data warehouse or the data warehouse as a service is because it's relatively new in the market and they are building out features as we speak. So if you look at the cloud platform of SAP, you have SAP HANA as the common thread between all of that, where you can either choose a HANA Enterprise, which is on-premise, or you can use the SAP Cloud Platform, which is nothing but your HANA database with a microservices architecture of HANA, where you can pick and choose different services that you want from the HANA system. And you also have the data warehousing cloud, which SAP has rolled out, which offers data warehouse as a service. And on the on-prem side, you have the BW4 HANA or the S4 HANA, and you also have the HANA data warehousing, where you can have your HANA database as a data warehouse as well. But as I said, these are still being built out, which is why we didn't bring that into the comparison. We looked at B4 HANA, which is a stable product right now, or HANA data warehousing. But essentially, transitioning to B4 HANA is being done by most customers, where they're kind of trying to see where they would fit in once SAP has a data warehouse cloud or a cloud platform in place. Next slide. Yeah, and with that, I hand it over to Chris, where we'll be looking at a comparison of the tools.
So I think for those of you that joined, and I'll say this for the folks that didn't join as well, this deck will be available for review afterwards. If we had comments on this, I think that folks who are experts in these individual tools would be able to potentially nitpick a few things about what we've commented here, and our intent is certainly not to make anything look better or worse than any other tool. I think that we really want to capture the different criteria by which we could rate these tools and give a general idea of how each of the tools is going to score, what the features are potentially, and what should matter to you as a customer. We looked at the overall architecture of the tool, and I've boldened here Snowflake because multi-cloud is key. The ability to negotiate across clouds is something that only Snowflake currently really gives you. From a data provisioning standpoint, looking across the four tools, you can make a case that each of them has their pros and cons. On the billing side, Snowflake's 1 minute, then by the second, elasticity that's automated is quite in the real world ends up producing unbelievably favorable results for your costing on the Snowflake side. Time travel, both Snowflake and BigQuery have time travel, but Snowflake offers up to 90 days on one of their subscriptions, whereas Google's only going to give you 7 days. From a maintenance standpoint, Snowflake and BigQuery are very close, with Azure requiring some sharding and probably indexing and things like that in order to make it work. And then, of course, BW is a beast and takes a ton of work. Next slide there. From a scaling standpoint, there's not much you can do on the Google side to scale it. It just scales automatically. On the Snowflake side, you do have automatic and instantaneous scaling. Azure is going to take a bit of downtime to scale it up, and then also back down. And then on the BW side of it is a bit heavy. Again, concurrency is going to be a push. On the cloning side, I think we've got the ability to clone anything without actually making a copy of the data. Whereas BigQuery is going to want to physically copy the data, not just the metadata like Snowflake does. So we give Snowflake the victory there. On the caching side, with the 3 different levels of caching on Snowflake, again, the impact on cost and performance is in the real world when you start to use Snowflake, as your principal data warehouse. It is spectacular. From a cost control standpoint, we look for the world to give us a new tool in this regard that will help enterprises and particularly procurement departments come up with a methodology that's going to make costing on these systems a bit more in line with what expectations are. And I say that because when you pay for what you use, then budgeting is based on how good you budget your consumption. And since nobody's particularly good at that yet across an enterprise, then it makes these the cost management a bit more difficult. Now there are controls in place with establishing quotas and monitoring the consumption, but estimating what those costs are going to be over a period of time can be difficult. I think BigQuery's made an effort with that with its pre-purchasing of capacity up front. There's pros and cons to that. And of course, BW, you buy everything up front pretty much, so your cost controls are built into that. Unfortunately, they're not good costs. So from a data share standpoint, we're going to give that one to Snowflake because of its data shares, which are industry leading at this point. Next slide there. Yep, dynamic data masking. This is something that Azure Synapse has supported for a long time, and it does it very seamlessly. We're going to give them the win on that one. Snowflake does support data masking, and Google through Apogee is going to support masking, but that involves another tool. On the ML side, I discussed this earlier. We're going to give that one to Google because of its full integration with its suite of machine learning functions that are available for modeling. On the streaming side, each has their own sort of approach to this, that if you need true streaming, then probably you have to give it to Google. Azure also supports streaming through Azure Stream Analytics, whereas Snowflake's going to have Snowpipe, and which are going to be micro batch as opposed to direct single individual records. On the data types and variety, they all support a mixture of data types. We give this one to Snowflake because of the way that it handles semi-structured data, which is very intuitive and quite easy to deal with. While the others can handle it through different methodologies, it's not quite as seamless as it is on Snowflake. Next slide. I think that gets us to the end of the comparison. Yep. So we've got some resources for folks to peruse, and again, you'll get a copy of this deck and can see, what other folks think about these different applications as well. I'm going to hand it back to Gopal now.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And I think we took quite a bit of time to go through each one of them slowly. And if any of the customer has a question, please reach out to us and we can have a one-on-one study your landscape, or even do a proof of concept comparing to what really best fits. We are happy to do that. We have a data science innovation lab, quick start, and modern cloud data warehouse quick start programs where we can actually help you experience them very quickly in 2 to 4 weeks time frame, where we can, these are like very fast setup and going, we can do that. But we have a lot of questions we gathered, and we are going to ask the panelists here today as much as we can, and bear with us. We are running about 10 minutes short, but please keep your answers short, and we can always get to the audience questions as well. And I have gathered them already. So Chris, you go first. One of the constant question is, why is the cloud data warehousing suddenly has been trending hard for the last 3 years? There are some customers concerned, or there's a little bit of apprehension that Hadoop from 2010 to 2015, it ran hot and then it just faded away. Is the cloud EDW migration, or is it going to just stay permanent? Just what's your thought? Because this is one of the constant question, or a lot of the laggards customers are just waiting and pausing and waiting. Should they start their journey today? Chris?
Thanks, Gopal. Unfortunately, I was on mute there for a sec. So it's a good question, and I think it's a worthwhile question for companies to look at this. Hadoop was was an ecosystem. Hadoop was not a single product, and it didn't solve a single thing. It was a huge ecosystem of applications and services that required a battalion of people to support. It was difficult to develop against. It is, but it did frame a direction for the world to go in when we started looking at distributed file systems and distributed execution of workloads. And so, in fact, I think probably 3 of the 4 tools that we're talking about today either use some of those services and applications in the background, if not directly using those as part of their data storage and execution engines. But what those SaaS applications do is they sort of make it very easy for us to not have to pay attention to those things. And so cloud data platforms are completely simplifying the experience that was much more complex when it was on-prem. And they're giving us this elasticity, which is, it's insane. It's insane that I can go from using nothing to 1 second later using 1,000 servers to execute a massive query. And so as this functionality is simply working, it is functioning well. It's working in high pressure situations across a lot of different enterprises right now. I think it's going to continue to grow. Every company is ultimately going to move its data platform to the cloud.
Thank you, Chris. I think the next follow-on question is, Chris, we have seen a lot of our customer, over a dozen of our customer, and we have a lot of the case studies to boot, have migrated to Snowflake or Azure, the cloud data warehouse. Is Snowflake a clear market leader? Is anybody running second? We have seen at least a dozen of our customers have migrated to cloud in the last 3 years. Can you just, I know you talked a lot about Snowflake. Why do you see that? Is it a Snowflake a clear leader, or is anybody running close? Or just give us your thought.
Sure. From a functional standpoint, I think Snowflake is, it doesn't really have any big gaps right now. It provides everything that customers are looking for. It works all the time. It's got a very, very intuitive sort of workflow and an intuitive interface. Working with SQL is very normal for folks that work in the data industry. It's cross cloud. I think it mitigates some risk for folks. Maybe they're on AWS today, but they might be moving to Azure tomorrow. That risk right there is formidable. If I was a Redshift customer, which is a platform we're not even talking about today, one that was super hot 3 years ago and is no longer hot today. Do we look at Azure with only Azure Synapse or Google with only BigQuery, or do we look at something that I can move around depending on where my business wants to take our cloud? I think it is the clear leader at this point, and I don't think it's going to change anytime soon.
Thank you, Chris. Can you talk a little bit on the ELT? I know it used to be ELT. Now, if I look at the case study that we have worked with JetBlue, one of our customers, is we have something called the DBT and Fivetran here. Obviously, we deployed Snowflake on Azure. Can you talk a little bit about the EL and the data pipelines and the transformation DBT?
Sure. So it used to be ETL. We'd extract, transform, and then load the data. So you've got a unit of activity that is, querying the data from a source, that's doing manipulation of the data, and then landing the data for consumption. And all of that sort of takes place in this magical box that's very difficult to debug and to version and to peer review and that sort of thing. And now in the modern world, we've got extract and load, which is a sort of single atomic activity. There's not a whole lot of stuff happening behind the scenes in that. Either I did the load or I didn't do the load, and it's easy for me to validate if my source and my destination or my target are the same. And then the meat and potatoes of what I need to do as a data professional, a data engineer, a data scientist is in the shaping and the transforming of the data. We use a tool called DBT. It is an open source project that's supported by Fishtown Analytics. It's a tool that we love. It's a tool that we use in every single one of our Snowflake implementations. It is probably the sort of most eye-opening tool that we've ever seen in terms of taking data work and moving it into the modern world by employing, modern software engineering best practices. We're doing CI/CD with our code. We're versioning our code. We're doing peer-reviewed pull requests. We're using Git for branching and that sort of thing. And it really has this democratization effect on the folks and the professionals and even some of the consumers of that data. So big thumbs up for ELT. Gets most of that technical debt of the EL in some other place, and big thumbs down for ETL.
Thank you, Chris. Chandler, Chris has been hogging, and so how do we? I know you have a difficult job of running our Microsoft practice, which is it's also growing. Very last few years, we have really grown our Microsoft BI practice, and I want you to delve deeper on the sweet spots for Azure Synapse, and can I talk about how it's going to stand out in the cloud data warehousing market for our customers?
Well, that's what's exciting about this entire space is I think it's Snowflake is obviously a tremendous service and they've been very successful. And when I look at Snowflake and I look at Synapse and all the other platforms, I think it's great for us because customers have choice. And so I think that we're recording this session today in mid 2021. I'd like to see us record this session again a year from now and kind of see where everybody is. But I'd say for Azure Synapse, customers that really look carefully at that, they really think about the data engineering experiences and bringing together, in my mind, is bringing together all these practitioner-focused areas like the engineering, data science, IT pro, analysts, and so forth. And so really kind of bringing those together with this notion of code free and code first, which I mentioned in the presentation. And really what that talks about is the barrier to entry for Azure Synapse is really about if you can go into the portal, the user interface is integrated within the Azure portal. I can go in and actually begin working with data without actually having to really know anything about underlying code. So I as someone that could do that, that's a pretty important part of this conversation. On the other hand, on the other side of that spectrum, if you are focused on bringing T-SQL together for transformation and loading, if you need to use the Spark engine for advanced analytics, you have that ability as well. So Microsoft is really trying to open up the audience, if you will, for everyone to come in and collaborate together using Azure Synapse Studio as a way to, bring analytics to the broad organization. I'd also say, of course, I mentioned the Azure integration. Obviously, Microsoft sees Azure Synapse as, first-party service. It's running on the platform, and so all the goodness that comes from Azure, from a security, a management, monitoring, Metastore, all that goodness is there for Synapse customers, and including the Azure DevOps for that continuous integration, continuous delivery. And then, ultimately with Synapse, you've got that integration with the other work that Microsoft's doing across their platforms. So I think customers who look at Synapse and adopt Synapse are looking at a way to bring analytics to the masses, have more people involved in that process, and provide that experience for relatively newcomers to this space, as well as those who have had years and years of experience.
No, thank you, Chandler. And just in the essence of time, I'm going to jump to our own. A lot of our customers are SAP customers, Arun, and you and we both are ex-BW developers, and we see a lot of our SAP customers still run BW, and we have migrated several of our customers to forHANA. Why does it make still a sense for the SAP customer? What are you see a lot of our customers move to cloud data warehousing like Snowflake and Azure Synapse. Can you talk what is the reason behind a lot of our customers even choosing to remain and we know we do recommend in some cases. Can you talk on the SAP data warehousing scenario?
Sure, Gopal. So one of the main reasons we see that customers are still staying on BW is because of the intellectual capital, as I would put it. So there's a lot of logic, a lot of transformations, and a lot of dependencies put into the BW system in terms of like currency conversions or like specific key figure calculations, etc., which makes it hard to kind of carve out specific areas that they can convert into a non-BW or a cloud data warehouse scenario. So a typical example, if we had to look at a customer wanting to transform their entire BW to a modern data warehouse platform, it's got too many details, and it looks intimidating at first. And the other big challenge that they're facing is because of the integrated IDE and everything else. So there is a lot of skills that are built around that, where if you look at it, a modern data warehouse, the only common currency is knowledge of SQL. And the other big thing that is happening is SAP is also getting their data warehouse, their cloud data warehouse in place. So there's also this thought of, should I wait for some more time? And at the same time, most of our customers are also slowly migrating from their ECC systems to an S4HANA system. So it's more of prioritization, and it looks too big to chew at first glance. And that's one of the main reasons why they're sticking around. And
Thank you.
that will change. That's what we're seeing.
Thank you, Arun. Since you touched a lot on intellectual capital, we as a company, a lot of our employees moved from SAP skill set maybe 5-6 years back to a BW and HANA, native HANA, to modern BI stack, SQL based. Tell us about how do we reskill and how we did, and talk about the cloud data warehouse development. What does it look like in the modern stack? So because you run our COE, so maybe for a lot of our customer, if you can share, what does it look like, the cloud data warehouse development look like?
Yeah, if you look at it, yes, Gopal. So if you're looking at it from migration to a cloud data warehouse, the terminology might be different, but the concurrent language across all these platforms is SQL. So what we're seeing in a BW for HANA or a HANA landscape is we might be using an IDE, but there's a translation happening to SQL in the backend for us. But if we are able to, if the team can be skilled up on terms of understanding and utilizing SQL to their benefit, then that makes the whole transition much easier. And a lot of these tools that we use, and at the same time, in terms of data replication and everything else, there are tools which allow you to do that without any code, which is more like point and click replication, and which are reliable as well. So which is what we found out as well. So when our developers were able to understand that I write a query on a query designer, but that translates into SQL like this, it makes that whole process much easier to transition to a cloud or a modern data warehouse platform.
Thank you, Arun. We have a lot of questions. Please bear with us. We probably will reach out to each of you. We have a lot of questions. Chris, there is one common question. I'm just trying to consolidate some questions. Let's talk about the EL tools. Okay, what if I'm extracting from SAP or in my S4? What are some of the EL tool options we have to Snowflake or so that is one common question I see. Can you talk a little bit about the tool options, Chris?
Yep. So we've got, and we're great partners with most of these tools. As a pure SaaS application, you have Fivetran out there that does SAP replication. This is put in credentials, select the objects you want to replicate, put in credentials of your target, and push go, and that's all you have to do. On the sort of infrastructure type side, we've got a couple of tools from, we've got a tool from Click, which acquired Attunity and then improved it. And we've got HVR, and these are two tools that we support. Both are very good at what they do and worth consideration. Click employed its application level replication, so it's not directly hitting the database. It's at the app level in SAP. and HVR, which was formerly only available for replication at the database level, also now has application level replication support. So we've got great competition in two fairly mature tools there, plus our SaaS application from Fivetran, which is also very mature, worth considering.
Chris, although we are past time, I would like to take at least one or two more questions. There is a question about Databricks, Azure Databricks, or so there is one question I would like to take because I have seen multiple of them. Can you talk a little bit about Databricks and where does it fit in?
Sure. So Databricks is cross-cloud processing engine that is very good at what we consider to be very good at particularly the ML and AI workloads. It is, in terms of competing at the straight SQL workloads from a cost perspective, it doesn't really compete very well against, BigQuery and Snowflake. We would prefer to see those workloads, and I think your pocketbooks would refer to see those workloads done against two tools that are much better at straight SQL workloads. If it goes beyond a SQL workload and it exceeds the ability to do some of the ML workloads, then in the past we've recommended Databricks to handle those. It integrates very smoothly both with with BigQuery Synapse and with Snowflake. And so, our recommendation is, sure, Databricks is great. It's not a data warehouse. Use it for your ML work if your current tool doesn't satisfy that need.
Got it. There are a lot of questions. Unfortunately, the time is up, but we do plan to have, for those who asked, we will probably try to reach out and try to address your questions. And thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.